Exciting machine. Yeah.
We're just waiting for Owen to join us. So if he doesn't join us in a minute, I'll make a start. But just to let you all know, I am struggling with my hearing today. So you might have to just shout up a little bit, even though we've got microphones. So it's just on that side. It's deliberately so that Tim can't.
Yours are in fact.
But also, I might not. I can't tell how loud or quiet I'm speaking.
Yeah.
So if I'm speaking really loudly, tell me. And equally, if you can't hear me, also tell me. Hopefully it will get better. It's bad timing, and it's also my birthday today.
Happy birthday.
So put some cake over and bring for those that choose not to indulge in the sugar. That's fine. So feel free to help yourselves to that. I think we'll make a start if that's okay. Morning, colleagues. This is our meeting held in public on the 2nd of July. We are going to be live streaming, so welcome to colleagues that are watching this either in person or at a later date. Very welcome. We are scheduled to finish around 1 o'clock today, but we'll take a break sort of midway through, so hopefully we'll keep time around that. I believe it is fire alarm test day today as well. So if we hear a fire alarm, I don't think there's any need to panic unless it goes on for longer than a few seconds, and then we might need to follow somebody to the appropriate exit. So I'm sure we'll get the instructions if that happens. I just want to put on record our thanks to two colleagues who left the board recently at the end of June. Ravina Shah and Sue Lorimer, who have obviously done a really helpful job for us in difficult times. So I want to put on record our thanks and appreciation for their work. I'd also like to welcome Juliet. This is her first public board meeting, I think. Is that right? Is it first one?
Enroll.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So welcome, Juliet. And we also again want to thank her for her contribution to the trust and her work with us in the coming months. We've got Leah Robbins here with us in place of Jude as well, so Leah's very welcome, and a couple of observers with David and Claire seeing how we operate as a business today, so they're very welcome. Colleagues, we haven't got a patient story today, which is a sad position for us to find ourselves in, because it's a really helpful way of setting the tone for the meeting and reminding us all of why we're here and the impact that we have in terms of the decisions that we make. But sadly, Philip, who was here with us earlier, is not able to share his story because we had an interpreter booked and the interpreter had to cancel at the last minute. So we're going to rearrange the story, and we have passed on our apologies to Philip for his visit and obviously not being able to share his story, which he's comfortable to come back at a later date and share with us. So that's a shame, but I think obviously it could not be avoided. So we have got a bit more time. Not that we want to fill that time because we've still got quite a lot to get through on our agenda today. So if we can still make progress through the agenda, I'd appreciate that. So in terms of apologies for absence, then we've got apologies from Jude Adams and also from Myriad as well, Associate and Exec Director. Any other apologies that I'm not aware of? No? Okay, thank you. I've not turned my mic on. That's my first fail of the day. So, colleagues, I should also remind you that you've all got mics, and if you wish to speak, you apparently press the mic and should be some instructions on your individual desks, and it gives you an order as well in terms of when the microphones come up. So hopefully that will all be straightforward. You'll all probably be very familiar with it. It's just me that's learning how to use that today. Okay, any declarations of interest that colleagues wish to know? No, if there are any that arise during the course of the meeting, then do let us know. Okay, we've got minutes from the meeting held on the 7th of May. Any comments or questions in relation to the minutes? No, we're happy to approve those. Yep, thank you, lots of nods. Any matters arising then from the previous meeting? Tim, did you want to pick up the ratification of decision taken under emergency powers?
Yeah, thanks, just colleagues to know, bit 6.1 to ratify the decision that was made utilising emergency powers on the 30th of May. Colleague benefit and reminder, this was in regards to a mandated submission that we have to make called Cost 7, where we submitted a position behind regarding the utilisation and availability of resources to support the organisation through 25-26. Where the detail is set out in the paper that has been circulated.
Okay, any questions or comments in relation to that? No, that's just good to know. Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Okay, let's move on then to the action tracker. Any comments or questions on the action tracker? No, that's just for us to receive and note. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Let's move on then to item 8, the Chief Executive scanning report. Okay, anything to
Yeah, just I take the paper as read, but obviously we're into a week where there's going to be quite a bit of focus on the 10-year plan going forward, and we will look to, as soon as that's available, do a kind of a synthesis with what that means for us. And obviously we'll look to feedback to the board at a later date. I think there are some elements that will not be a surprise in terms of, you know, there is more of a focus on care closer to home. There is really looking to leverage as much as possible around digital tools, and also, you know, prioritising prevention. That's kind of going to be the 3 sort of core things. I think additionally as well, there's quite a bit of focus going to be around quite ambitious targets around urgent and emergency care. And things like, not just what we do, but things like improving ambulance and A&E performance, and trying to get to a place where there's an expansion of things like same day and community-based care. And there'll really be a focus as well on enhancing mental health care support around some of that. So quite a lot of work to come on that. I think there's an underlying desire to, as far as possible, to reduce hospital pressures, which also feels quite important. And, you know, forgetting the ultimate reason why we're here, and not want to forget that, is that, you know, we want to improve patient outcomes across the piece. And I would also add colleague wellbeing that sits within that. I think there's going to be quite a bit of pointing as well to the forthcoming winter, and an expectation that we are as ready as possible going forward. So that's kind of the 10-year plan. I think sort of more local to us in the context of just some things I'd just like to draw attention. So obviously, financial challenges remain. Again, I'm a little bit careful with that word, because, you know, we have to keep reminding ourselves there's £1.9 billion worth of taxpayers' money that we have stewardship for. So whilst we have to find £110 million worth of efficiency, I think it's very important that we don't forget that we've still got a great opportunity to support our local people and help them remain healthy and prevent where possible. But there's things like the mutually agreed resignation scheme, and also the exit hole strategy. We've already kind of got saving around £12 million around some of that sort of stuff. It's not easy, as you can imagine, not just within our organisation, but several organisations, when there's an inevitable thing, which is about reducing the number of people that work in the organisation, that just naturally carries with it a set of thoughts around that. And I think just to finally, for me, just some good things, and we'll probably talk a little bit further about progress around the GIRF scheme. It's certainly quite important in terms of some things like the DEXA bone scanner, again, quite important things. And again, just want to recognise, and I would declare an interest having Jamaican parents, that is the Winglish generation, and also Armed Forces Week come past us. So, quick snapshot there, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions, or if there's anything I haven't covered that people want to discuss, I'm happy to take, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Zoe. Any comments or questions? No, as you say, quite a lot going on. Oh, sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. In the context of the forthcoming 10-year plan, proposals for urgent and emergency care seem to be more urgent, full of good proposals. I wondered whether we've had any indication that those proposals will be accompanied by any extra resource. And if the answer is, as I suspect, no, have we any plans as the NCA to work with our partners to see how we can put in resource things like same-day emergency care, virtual wards, community response or rapid response, and mental health crisis hubs. We've spoken before about the Better Care Fund, and that's been remitted to the Performance Committee. I would have thought we need as a board to understand how we can marshal our resources behind these proposals, particularly if we can get some of these expanded in advance of winter.
Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff, so thank you, Jeff. So you Brexit first answer to the first question is I think it's an emphatic no, no ambiguity around that. And obviously linked to something that we may discuss a little bit later in the afternoon, perhaps. But you'll see that there's quite a lot of work ongoing with our partners to try and address and improve our circumstances. And you know, we've got some good pockets of practice that are happening in the likes of Rochdale and Bury, and also I think that's all the say GP community and stuff. And also a real commitment in Oldham, for example, particularly around our front door clinical colleagues, to really do what we can to reduce the 12-hour decision to admit type stuff. So there's a lot of commitment. What's challenging, certainly for our local authority partners and also our mental health partners, is actually resources, and particularly financial resources, and the availability of particularly of capital at this moment in time. And if Leah's got any more to add, but certainly we are working very, very hard with each of our local authority partners to see what we can to get to a good pooled and positive position in terms of resource allocated to try to improve the care that we provide. But it's not straightforward given the resource constraints.
Okay, thank you. Leah, did you want to add something?
It's really just to say what Owen's already said in terms of the challenges around finance, but we are working with system partners. We've got building relationships with MWAS, and we're working with the regional group in terms of the ambulance handovers and how we reduce our times there and what plans and escalations we can put in place. We've got a working group here in Salford as well around ESTEC, and that really isn't about additional resource, that's about how we do things differently and how we get that clinical engagement. And then there's a plan right across across each of the sites. We have been given some capital for allowing us to move our UTS in Oldham. There's currently somebody in there already, so there's it's not straightforward as I said, but there are plans. There are some plans afoot, and we do have some capital, small amount of capital to help with some of that.
Okay, thanks, Leah. Suzanne?
I was just going to pick up on that point there that Leah just made. So I know we don't expect any additional resources as we've referenced, but we did get access this year in our capital plan to cover the largest proportion of UEC capital funding across Greater Manchester. So we are absolutely focused on getting best use of that in the way that Leah's described.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Any other questions or comments on the Chief Exec's report? Thanks, colleagues. Let's move on then to the IPR. Leah, are you going to take us through this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so take the report as read. In terms of the people metrics, we've had a focus on welcome back, and we can see that coming to fruition. As Owen's already described, the MAR scheme is now in concluding phases, and as part of winter planning, we'll see a focus on vaccination rates and trying to improve those in the run-up for the winter period. And there is some special cause in improving maritime compliance, which is pleasing to see. Getting me wish to add to that once I've gone through the rest of the slides. So we've got performance is static at the moment. We are navigating the challenges of the vacancy that the vacancy hold is presenting. We've got a continuous focus on productivity, which we're doing through the My Recovery Plan. And we've got ongoing conversations with our commissioning colleagues and finance in terms of quantifying what is needed beyond the productivity to close the gap to achieve RTT for 25-26. ICB colleagues are also working on demand management schemes, which will help in terms of that gap that we have. And we've had a clinical engagement session, an outpatient disruption. It was entitled, which we had really good clinical engagement. And again, that will be involving us doing things differently, rather than the kind of busted flush of a traditional outpatient setting. In terms of cancer, we are continuing to see increasing demand for dermatology, which presents us with some significant challenges. We've had some significant backlog issues in colorectal cancer. However, they are working through now, and they have been prioritised for us with working with partners to support. The UEC, we have seen an improvement in the 4-hour performance, particularly at Salford, which is pleasing to see, given that they've had a specific programme focusing on UEC and how they can improve that time to be seen and treated. And as I've already described, we've got ongoing conversations to relocate the UTS in Royal Oldham. Key focus in the next month for us in UEC is a 12-hour reduction, particularly at Royal Oldham, SDEC development at Salford, and an NCA-wide reduction in the 45-minute ambulance handovers. So we have, in terms of the quality performance, we have got a challenge with hand hygiene compliance, which is a leading indicator for IPC and therefore a focus for colleagues. There's been a spike in stillbirths, which will be picked up in the maternity report later in today's session. And colleagues will be aware of a Never event last week, which was reported via the NESPA, which you may have questions on. Not aware of that. Okay.
Did you want to say a little bit more about that, Leah?
Yes. Yeah, do you want to
Julia?
Yeah, sorry. Apologies. I think you might have been aware. There's a Never event. It was a long blood transfusion. Never event. Patient administered the wrong blood group. The patient didn't come to any harm, thankfully. Well, hasn't come to any harm so far. So we're obviously doing an investigation into the causes of that. But we've asked for that to be quite a wide-ranging look at complete end-to-end processes, including use of technology and things like that. So expect a significant piece of work to come from that. But yeah.
Okay, can we pick that up as part of the reporting performance committee, follow that up in terms of the findings when you, yeah. For the learning, yeah. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Leah?
no, just to have skipped over the finance, which Suzanne may want to add something to.
Suzanne, did you want to add anything on finance?
No, I'll pick it up under my agenda.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the IPR? Anna?
I noted on the people section that we called out in the report an area of concern is overpayments, and although it's the lowest I can see in terms of value for the last 12 months. It's still significant if it continues at that rate. So I just was curious as to what action is being taken to try to ensure we minimise, if not reduce, or completely eliminate overpayments.
Thank you, Carmen. It's a perennial challenge, and quite often overpayments, the primary reasons are late notification of return from sickness or changes of hours, maternity leave. There's a reminder that we send out every month to update rosters, so it's quite proactively undertaken. It's quite a challenge if you're using a system once in a blue moon that you then remember it. So we do as much as we can proactively, and where we look at any significant overpayments, we'll do a review of learning and then take that through the care organisation.
Are they typically recovered, or is that near a bit lost trust?
I think I'd have to take that question offline. Obviously, we look to recover as much of it as possible, but there will be an element of it. So I may have to take that offline and come back to you.
Thank you.
Suzanne, did you want to add anything?
I did. So just by way of reassurance, I'm meeting with colleagues this afternoon after board to take the same line of inquiry to make sure that we're doing all we should be doing. And in terms of recovery, just to review our policy in terms of recovery in practice. So I've picked up the same thing to make sure we've got a robust action plan to do with it.
That's great. Thank you.
Report that back through.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Aziz?
Thanks, Chair. You may not know this, but I've banged on about appraisals ever since I joined, and it's fantastic to see the appraisal rate at 89.25%, just shy of our 90% rate. So I just wanted to thank everybody, on the exec team and their colleagues for working really hard to make sure that all staff get a proper conversation every year about their well-being and their performance and objectives for the next year. I think that's really brilliant news. I also think it's very good news on people metrics that, after a long period of rising sickness, we've had 4 consecutive months of a downward trend in sickness.
Thanks, Aziz. Any other comments or questions? Colleagues, this is my first introduction to the IPR, so I wonder if we can take offline an action to have a look at the IPR in terms of what it's actually telling us, because certainly I wasn't clear from the IPR what actions were taken in some really key areas. So we talked about 12-hour waits, and obviously there's a focus there. I think we are going to be really closely measured as an organisation against e-metrics, and I'm not sure the IPR would give any confidence to the public that we're actually clear what we're doing about this. So it might be a presentation issue, but certainly from my perspective as a new person looking at this and all the public, I'm not sure we would be assured that we're actually making the progress that we need to make. So I wonder if it's something we can take offline and have a look at in a bit more detail, particularly around the key things that we actually want to major on in terms of our areas of improvement, which you touched on earlier, Leah, but I think certainly having visits with the ED services over the last few weeks, I was quite shocked actually to see the level of corridor care that we have. And certainly it wouldn't be an ambition of mine to continue in that vein. So I think we need to be really clear about the things that we want to focus on. And then we make sure we major on those in terms of our oversight here at the board and giving the public confidence that we're actually focusing on those things as well. So is that something that everybody would be comfortable with? Okay, thank you. Who else? I'm trying to figure out. Jeff?
On that point, first of all, I very much welcome the review you've asked for, particularly your emphasis on corridor care. In addition, though, to looking at the format and content of the report, can we also look again at the issue of performance in our community health services, which we've raised a number of times, but we're still not seeing anything on those services coming to the board? Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's it's completely silent on our community services, and I know colleagues have got some ambition to include that in the IPR. I think that's something you can take away as well. Thank you, Jeff. Tim?
Yeah, I suppose it follows on a little bit. I mean, we kind of repeat each month we've got a bed shortfall at Oldham, and there are kind of a set of actions that are loosely related to that. But I would kind of, I think on that specific issues, we need to confront that shortfall, what we're prepared to accept and what we're doing about it, and the degree to which those actions mitigate that. So so generally connecting those actions to an area of concern would be good. Just a minor point, the star factors around data quality are kind of missing from the report. We had a data quality report coming to audit committee, and star factors were seen as kind of an important plank by which we are assured, and they dropped off this report. So I think important to have them back.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Tim. Okay, Julia.
Thank you. I just want to pick up a point around the safety of patients in the emergency departments. So it's been mentioned a couple of times. Rafik and I will be meeting with the leadership teams of both Oldham and Salford, a care org group, to try and understand what assurances they have in place around 30 patients in the departments. I'm not sure that from an executive point of view, we've got the level of visibility that we would want to see in order to assure ourselves around that. So we'll bring that back to QPC, but just to kind of be aware that we want to do that piece of work to look in more detail at that, because I'm not sure that we have actually got the metrics that we would want to see and understand what improvements are being made as a result of that. So to feed that back, but that's a piece of work we'll get done in July, so we'd have a little bit more awareness of what we would be expecting to see as a result of that. But I do think it is a real area of focus and risk, and I don't think it's necessarily about what's happening in ED. I think it is an end-to-end pathway issue that we need to understand what we're looking at in order to get that level of assurance. Work to do there.
Thanks, Julia. Chris.
Just a quick one, really, just to, obviously like the idea of focusing the IPR on the things we want to achieve. And of course, one of the things we want to achieve is continued safety. And so I'll just draw attention to some of these metrics where they're not things that we're trying to do, but they're indicators of the fact that we are continuing to provide safe care. So I just think that that's an area we could look at as well in anything which we're doing in terms of looking at the IPR.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Owen.
It's just a question to yourself about when would you like that review to come back? What's the sort of timeline that you're thinking of, please?
I mean, I would like to see it sooner rather than later, so I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a conversation we could take offline. I actually wonder whether it might be something that the board wants to spend a bit of time on in terms of understanding what we would like to see and what assurances we feel we need to get from some of the metrics and also some of the things that are perhaps not here. I mean, I actually think that whether we like it or not, it's going to be in the public domain around our assessment of our performance very shortly. I think we've heard signals nationally that that's exactly how the pressure is going to be applied to organisations by the level of transparency that's applied to the data, and I don't have a problem with that. I think that's absolutely right. But I think we need to then focus on what's our response to that. Are we okay with some of these areas of our performance? Being clear what we're going to do about it, what's in our control, what's in our gift, and some of the things that we may want to advocate for with our partners, with our commissioners. But we absolutely need to own it and understand it and be clear what we're going to do about it. And if I just looked at the IPR, I definitely wouldn't get that level of assurance. So I think perhaps if we can pick that up in our July strategy session or development session, and then we bring that back. David's here with us, chomping at the bit to do some more things around data as well. So I know we've got some willing participants in terms of being able to help us with that. Okay. Any other questions or comments, please? No. Thank you very much. So let's move on then to the section. So we've got the risk appetite statement. Tim, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. guess start this by asking both to acknowledge the work that Hazel Dangle, our head of risk management across the organisation, has done to develop the strategy, which includes liaising with a number of colleagues. I'd also note that the paper that's been circulated around risk appetite and risk tolerance has been subject to quite lengthy discussion through Finance Committee and Audit and Risk Committee over the course of the last few weeks. So apologies to Jeff and Tim, who are probably going to hear this for the third, fourth time. What the paper set out does is, I think, a significant revision from what the organisation might have done previously. Colleagues will know that the risk appetite statement is a much simplified version of what had been brought forward previously. I think in 24-25, the risk backed out position had 14 categories. Through the work that Hazel's done through the subcommittees and with colleagues, we've reduced that down to 8. It is intentionally not designed to be prescriptive. It is designed to provide a framework for the organisation to work within, to assess and understand its risks and take decisions around how those risks are mitigated or whether they become accepted risks. I think the significant change that was proposed by the Audit and Risk Committee and subsequently supported is the adoption of risk tolerance. I think it's something the organisation considered through 24-25, but never really sought to implement. I'm really clear that given where the organisation is, it seems that it may or may not have to take, the notion of tolerance becomes really, really important. It isn't designed to answer every single question that the organisation's got. It's a document that's designed to be considered and used as and when we take decisions, particularly in regards to the utilisation of resources. There's a significant piece of work that we need to do organisationally to develop a culture of risk management that's entirely in keeping with what board hopefully will support today. I envision that being, endeavour through 25-26, and I think it's through the actions of the board in terms of decisions and its shifting risk appetite and risk tolerance that will set the top of organisational culture through 25-26. Not going to add anything else because I think the paper is self-explanatory, but Tim, I'm conscious that you chair Audit and Risk Committee. Not sure there's anything that you might want to add around this.
Yeah, I think more it has generated really good discussion at the committees I've been on, which kind of shows the interest in it. I kind of think it's incumbent on all of us in, all the parts who play in our governance structure, probably to begin to try and use this to challenge each other, to remind each other of how it may inform some of our decisions. Because I think unless we do that, it will sit on the shelf. But I think the concept of risk tolerance is a really relevant one, as Tim has said, in the current climate and the challenges ahead. So yeah, very supportive of it.
Okay, thanks, Tim. As you say, it's been through quite a lot of scrutiny already by Audit and Risk. Lorna?
Yeah, the direct linkage, I'm really supportive of this. I think it really helps us start to think about how we manage the risk. But it links back to your early view about the IPR. Actually, there's something about correlating what we're saying about our tolerance levels and our appetite in terms of therefore what we're tracking at an IPR level, and the two should marry up. Where we're saying we're not prepared to tolerate, we should start to see and drive metrics that help explain what are we therefore doing. So I think it has wider usage and will carry through into changes that we're doing as well. We should be able to link it back to that risk and the appetite we have.
Yeah, no, thanks, Lorna. I think that goes back to the point that Tim was making about it becomes the language that we help the conversation around what we're prepared to accept and what we're not. So yeah, absolutely, thank you. Any other comments or questions? So we're being asked to receive. Okay, thank you. So we're being asked to receive the statement and around appetite and risk tolerance, and also approve the statement and the approach that's been proposed. Are we happy to do that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So up to you again, Tim, around the assurance framework.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll go through this in detail. colleagues will know from the paper circulated, it sets out principal strategic risks of the organisation. This represents the opening risk position for the Board Assurance Framework 25-26, and it has been subject to and supported through each of the subcommittees, either in person or virtually, where we've got a cycle of meetings that doesn't support it. I'm not proposing to say anything more on it. I think it is self-explanatory, and it will be considered on a regular basis, both through subcommittee arrangements and through here. And it's important to read and consider this through 25-26 in conjunction with risk appetite and risk tolerance paper.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments on the Board Assurance Framework? Oh, Chris, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I think it's really helpful, as you say, with lots of this at various committees. And I do think your last point is right there. There's a bit of work to do, isn't there, in making sure that the risks and the tolerances that we describe in the BAF hit and meet those tolerances described in the paper we presented before. At the moment, I don't think they quite do. So there is a bit of bringing those two things together. But what I'm talking about is that we have for example, we have a low tolerance proposed for quality. Yet in the papers we're saying there's actually a high, we're tolerating a higher level. So I think we've just got to make sure those things are consistent. Don't want to become too nerdy about these things, which you can't you? I do think that isn't quite right at the moment.
I think it just highlights the gaps for us, doesn't it? Okay, Rachel.
That was going to be my point, actually. That gap is what we talked about, and the challenge that I made at RM Audit Committee. You know, yes, we may have an appetite and a tolerance, but today we are tolerating a different tolerance level. And that gap, we then need to tie that back to our portfolio committee, look at where we're spending money. Are we spending things in the right area? And I think what I'd welcome is over the coming months to see outputs of deep dives around that. So, for example, you know, from a digital perspective, though I absolutely support knowing what our appetite is and agreeing a tolerance, there is a gap at the moment from what we've actually got funding to invest to achieving that tolerance level. So what would that look like if we were actually to achieve that? How long would it take us? What would that transformation programme look like? And are we in the right track at the moment? Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. And you're Tim?
Yes, I think that's really helpful. I think the point I'm making is probably a reiteration of a conversation, Jack, that you and I had at the Finance Committee. I think the purpose of the tolerance appetite statement, as we've described, is to get into discussions in the level of detail about risk that you just articulated, Rachel. So what are we going to accept? What are we going to do? You know, what aren't we going to do? As opposed to getting into a conversation on what may or may not be in a box on a particular piece of paper, which is something that I would implore and encourage we absolutely move away from.
Yeah, absolutely. This should be a live document that we are using to inform our decision making as well and to be comfortable with it. Any other comments or questions? Jeff?
To make a quick one, I think the key point for me was the one that Rachel made, is that this process should lead us to make more active decisions about how we allocate our resources. The resources are finite, but I think it will be much more fluid in how we apply our resources to our priorities. Some areas around see less resources through that process. Some will receive more, others get more, but the ones that we, through this process, we see where the gap is. And I think, you know, that flexibility in resource allocation is something we think we need to work really hard at. Or snowed under and trying to save money. But I think, as Erin said before, the key issue is, yeah, but the totality of our resource can be more fluid.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jeff. Any other comments or questions? No, okay. So we're being asked to receive and approve the Board Assurance Framework, noting the risk appetite and risk tolerance. Are you happy to do that? Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item 11 then, to the Finance Committee report. And Jeff, I believe you're going to take us through it.
Thanks, Chair. Two reports here from meetings of the committee on the 16th of May and 20th of June. I'm presenting these on behalf of Sue Lorimer, who chaired these meetings. I'll take them together. And assuming they've been read, I'll highlight just a few key issues. First of all, the Trust financial position is at this point of the year slightly ahead of target, but is very early in the year. Suzanne Robson will take you through shortly the detail of that position. I simply wanted to alert the board to the strong performance on the cost improvement plan at this point in the year, which at 59% of the 110 million target is better at this stage of the year than in previous years. However, it is early days, and the Finance Committee will be continuing to seek assurance throughout the year, and we'll be doing that by tracking progression of savings schemes from identification to pipeline to approval and then to transacted. And the assurance the committee needs is that that progression is sufficient to get the run rate down to the best level at the end of the year. So a lot more work for the committee on that. Secondly, the committee wants to alert the board to the proposal from NHS England to make payments of the deficit support funding subject to delivery of savings being in line with our annual plan. And the committee believes this is a significant risk, not to our cost improvement programme that remains the same amount, but to our cash position. And that risk could, at worst case scenario, be as much as 43 million. So the details of the way in which that conditionality will operate are being worked up, and we're well served by having Suzanne being involved in that work. But the committee thought we should add an additional risk to the board assurance framework to recognise this risk that's been done, and we'll track that in forthcoming meetings. Thirdly, the committee wanted to alert the board to the fact that our income targets are not yet agreed with the ICB, and we've dealt with that earlier on in this meeting. And I should add at this point that Suzanne alerted us to proposals which are now emerging nationally for a new financial framework for acute trusts, which will be brought in on a phased basis. More detail will be forthcoming, but one implication is already clear, and that is that we will need a clinical strategy to inform that new financial framework and our response to it. And that's something the board will be thinking about when we get that clinical strategy during the course of this coming year. The committee focused particularly through these two meetings, particularly the May meeting, on the productivity challenge, and in particular the mine recovery plan process, and how that's being supported by the Getting It Right First Time team. The committee will now go into a deep dive on that productivity improvement process at its next meeting. The committee also discussed, at the behest of the Chief Executive of NHS England, whether we should make use of wholly owned subsidiaries. Our discussion on that is at an early stage. We have concerns about the motivation for such schemes being the right motivations, and we've commissioned a brief and high-level scoping exercise, and that will be brought back. Finally, we approved the Green Plan and the first estate strategy, which are on your agenda at the moment. Very happy, Chair, to answer any questions or take any comments, which help Suzanne with your best to answer.
Okay, thanks for that, Jeff. Really comprehensive. Any comments or questions? No, thank you. That's for us to note. Suzanne.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to move to, and thank you to Jeff for a thorough update. This is one of the cohesion with the things that I would want to highlight from our finance monthly position. So at month 2, we're reporting an 11.7 million deficit, which is marginally better than Plan 47K, ahead of where we expect to be at this stage. I anticipate that we will maintain that position for a Q1 status as well. We're just in the process of closing down our 3 position, and I expect us to maintain that position. I just wanted to pick up the point that Jeff already raised there around, and to remind board about the fact that underpinning that delivery of that position is we're in receipt of £9.6 million for the deficit support funding, which is not guaranteed. That is tied to our successful delivery of our plan, which is, as we've noted, the rationale why we've escalated the risk around cash, because there will be a risk associated with receipt of that if we do not continue to deliver in line with our plan. Elevating natural watershed framework risks will make sure that we're paying attention to that. Just in terms of what we're doing internally to make sure we're focusing, we're ramping up the governance around cash management in terms of oversight and our cash management processes to make sure we're in a position to respond to risks should they emerge in that sense. Efficiency, as we've both touched on, we are just £2.1 million ahead where we expected to be at month 2 in terms of how we phased our plan. So we are a little bit ahead. And as just already noted, we are better than we were this time last year. That said, we know our plan is back-ended. We've got lots of work to keep focused and continue to work on that trajectory. And as noted, the importance will be triangulating everything we identify in a cost improvement plan to our run rate reduction, and being confident that our spend overall as an organisation stays within the 1.9 billion resources that have been made available to us. So we're going to put some real focus into Finance Committee on that point, so we can track and have confidence over the coming months that happens, and also that those schemes actually do impact in the way we would expect. But good progress as to where we are at the moment. Just want to flag some risks around temporary staffing. We have seen a spike in temporary staffing in month 2, which myself and Juliet are spending some time understanding. We've put in place some meetings that we had last year that we want to reinvigorate to make sure the focus around grid control and understanding on bank agency spending remains. So at the moment, that trend does not continue. We do have additional banking agency targets that we're required to deliver against as part of our plan, and that spike puts us off kilter in terms of what we need to deliver. From a capital perspective, we are very early on in the financial year, so I have no risks that I want to escalate to board. But just to note that we will be spending more time in the Finance Committee over the coming months as we progress into that plan. Because we've got a significant amount of capital resource to get through, we need to make sure not only we're living on track with those programmes, but we have the capital resource within our teams to help support that happening. Again, that's another area of focus within committee. So that's all I was going to draw out from the report. Take questions.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Any comments or questions for Suzanne on the finance report? Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just have a couple of observations. The first one partly to the potentially integrated performance report, in that we're all in our language now talking much more about productivity, and that's a national theme. And to Jeff's point, if we're going to get out from under the amount of time that we constantly have to spend with the NHS on CIP, then productivity needs to be a real focus and well understood. But on those 2 points, in terms of a real focus, we don't tend to see productivity information at trust boards, in my experience generally, and certainly there's nothing in the papers today that I would regard as a productivity indicator from anywhere in the organisation. And by productivity, I understand it to mean, and it's far more sophistication than this, but it has to relate inputs to outputs on a kind of a real-time basis. What X are we getting per Y that we're putting in? And so I think we need to develop that much more as an organisation. Also important to that, because productivity is a conceptual thing. At the VCP meeting, where we address the aspects around the recruitment hole, we ask a question around productivity. And as Gertie and colleagues will share, the understanding of productivity across the NCA is varied, to put it politely. In fact, that there wasn't really a response with about a Monday answering a productivity question that bore down the word productivity. It was in people's minds, it's much more activity. If activity is increasing, productivity increasing is the relationship that people seem to hold. So I think there is a piece of educational work to do, and I think there's a bit of conviction about where and when one might want to see productivity data and information, and do something about that in context. Because if productivity can be got right, or it can be perceived as a more technical thing, it then, to Jeff's point again, frees up those resources to reallocate in other areas and makes left shift a real possibility. While acute trusts aren't freeing up resource in terms of productivity, left shift remains a wish, in my view. The second one, I just wanted to point out, although we're making some good progress on CIP, we do have an area of concern around the progress of the Salford Care Organisation. And the reason that's important is that in the interim arrangements, and I mentioned this at the CIP SRO meeting on Monday, the operational expenditure of your 5 care organisations is around 1.528 billion. So of your 1.906 billion, 1.528 is in the 5 care organisations. Of that 1.5 billion, almost $1 billion is in Salford. So you've got one chief officer in Joe Forgus with 979 million of OPEX on her shoulders, and the associated CIP. So at Owen's request, I've been doing some work with Joe in the last 36 hours to try and work out what we can do to enhance the capability at Salford, so that changes the dial on the delivery, because it's lagging behind where the other care organisations are. And so as at today, the gap, you'll see different data in your reports, but the gap today is 41.5 million. Unidentified, 23 million of that sits in the Salford Care section. So unless we do something to support and shift the dial at Salford, that will grow as a risk against the overall CIP. So I just wanted to make those two observations around productivity as a short to medium term thing. There's a more immediate thing that we're addressing at the Salford Care Organisation, because we need to shift the dial.
Thank you for that, Joe. That's really helpful. Tim?
Well, it may be a quick answer to this. It was on the deficit support funding. It's just, have we got enough clarity on that withdrawal process, and whether we've made the right assumptions as forward?
Do you want me to come back at the I'm talking up some
Okay, yeah, fine. Perfect. Thank you. Aziz?
Thanks, Chair. The government's talked about funding for health inequalities. I mean, it's publicly announced them. I know that doesn't necessarily mean much, but we've not, presumably as one of the areas with the highest health inequalities, some of that funding should be coming to the Northern Care Alliance. Do we know anything about that and how that might impact the work we're trying to do here?
Thank you. Lisa?
Okay, so just in terms of the productivity question, I think we'll disagree at all. I think that that's that extent of the sentiment that we've held in Finance Committee, which is why the majority of the agenda is dedicated to financial position and productivity. And as just outlined, we've heard some of the work that's happening in my recovery. We're going to hear next time about what does that mean in terms of our achievement of productivity. Perhaps that's the organisation. So I agree with that point. I think the other point to mention is the new oversight performance framework that's imminent, and we will talk about it a bit more in part 2 of the board today. We'll also put that focus on that. So, we as the board will need assurance around all of those metrics naturally as part of that. So I think connecting those two things together will help us with that. But I agree there is a broader point about productivity and understanding within the organisation. So we can hold it at board, but actually how's that ripple through the organisation in terms of that. In terms of the Salford and cost improvement programme, I think this is one of those examples, to Jeff's point earlier about how do we direct our resources to the places where we really need to the support, and that's what we've actively been doing over the past few weeks in particular, about what support is needed within the social care organisation to get things moving in the way we need it to, and some good conversations about what that looks like and how we do that. So that's the moving resources in action I would describe. Deficit support funding, not as clear an answer in that sense. So the receipt of all deficit support funding was on the basis that there's some information made on our behalf by the RCB. For deficit support funding for Q2 was on the basis of a submission made on behalf of us by the RCB to region and regional colleagues nationally. That recommendation, that analysis is not something that's been shared with providers, but obviously it's on a basis of where we are all performing as providers within the system against our plan. So I'm not close to the process because it's an ICB-led process and a regional process, but we expect to hear the outcome of that within the next week or so. In terms of our plans, there's a slight nuance in that because this process wasn't live at the stage we did our plan. It's something that came subsequent to planning. So that's why, in terms of our assumptions, we made the assumption that deficit support would be continuing, come what may. But now we just need to make sure the nuance of this new process is reflected, and hence I'm escalating this throughout cash. And then finally, on health inequality, I'm sorry I don't have anything as easy in terms of confirmation of additional funding that our organisation has released, but we may hear something in the 10-year plan.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. I think you're going to pick that up for you.
Yeah, what I would just draw attention to is the recently shared provider oversight. One of the things that does stand out in the description of that is that health inequality data is not being used directly to make judgments about performance. It's described in the provider oversight as being information that would be used for contextual purposes. That leads me to a conclusion to say, whatever the narrative may be, it's hard to imagine if it's not a part of the performance framework. And you think about the tenor of the conversation we've had today, it's hard to imagine that all of a sudden, if it's only being used in the performance framework as contextual information, how then it becomes a funding source. We probably need to do a little bit more digging, but I think I just wanted to set what is factual in terms of what appears to be the emphasis by NHS England at this point in time.
Okay, thank you for that, Owen. I do think we have heard a narrative nationally, though, that says that there is an opportunity to influence around this agenda because, there's conversations around, base budgets and also organisations getting recognised for the activity that they do. And I think if we're able to tell that story in terms of the impact, then I think, we should take those opportunities when they arise. Certainly, that's some of the narrative that I heard on a call nationally yesterday. Okay, Chris?
Yeah, it was just to say I'm sure that what Simon's described is correct in terms of the national position, but of course just remind us that it's sort of almost mathematically, unless the health inequalities, at least in terms of access, are addressed, then the risk of achieving the overall target is very, very great. You can't really achieve the overall targets unless you address the inequality issue. So I think it's worth, whatever the national position is or the context of it, it's worth bearing that in mind, because if we don't address some of those things, we're not going to get where we're supposed to get anyway. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? No? Thank you, Suzanne. So that's for us to note. We're going to move on now to the annual green plan. So Suzanne, I believe you're going to present this as well. This has also been through Finance Committee as well, as Jeff mentioned.
It has, yeah. So I'll take it that colleagues have an opportunity to read through the document. Just a couple of points I'll just draw from it, if I may. So we've had our first launch of our Green Plan back in October 2021, for those that were here at that point. And last September, the board set a mandate to review and refresh that Green Plan. Hence, it's with us today and extending us into the period. And it did give us opportunity not only to recommit our ambitions around our net zero ambitions, but also to focus on any of the lessons learned, anything we would need to refocus on, but anything particularly around embedding from our targets and our practices in there. So the document sets out clearly our ambitions, so at a high level 57% reduction in carbon emissions by 2032 towards our net zero trajectory. That is in step with regional climate goals, so we're in sync with us and international expectations. What we try to do in this document this time is put a real focus on key areas, as you would expect, so heating, electricity and consumption, and Nadine has just arrived with us and we'll pick up some of those aspects because there's a triangulation to the strategy which she will touch on in a minute. But a focus on travel transport, reducing waste, sustainable practice, food catering, procurement, all of those aspects that can really help us drive forward with this agenda. There is some really good clinical engagement around this as well. So in terms of the development of it, that's been good to see that people are passionate about it, because they're passionate about it not only because the organisation say we need to focus into this. One big key learning from last time was around governance and strengthening the governance of net zero. So we have established a sustainability, it's a real mouthful this one, a sustainable strategy advisory delivery group, which I chair, and that reports direct to Finance Committee. And we've made sure that each of our areas of focus is championed by a lead, which is outlined in the document, and that will allow us to track performance and delivery against each of those smart measures. We should try to really focus on those being smart measures. So today's not around the detail of where we're up to in terms of delivery. It's setting out our ambitions around here, and we will track delivery performance through committee. And as we've already noted, Chair, this was approved at this committee.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne, for that. Any comments or questions? No, so we're being asked to approve that on recommendation. Oh, sorry, Aziz.
I think it's a great plan. It's really, it's clear, it's really easy to understand. That focus on 75% of our emissions around heat and power is absolutely right, because, the other bits are they have to be done, but they're minor compared to that massive heat and power, 75% of our emissions. I worry that, and this is not just us, this is all organisations, are not paying attention to AI and the amount of power that AI is consuming. And there's no mention of this. And as we move to embrace AI, that will increase our consumption of power, actually. And I just wondered how we bring that into this plan and conversation, because we will need more power if we embrace AI as an organisation, which we are already.
Okay, thanks for that, Lorna.
There is an ongoing, not just national conversation, but global conversation about the trend of cloud computing, particularly, which, depending which newsletter you read or article you read, either is entirely killing the planet or is besting sliced bread. There's a shift in many organisations who have adopted a cloud-first strategy, which we have said we have a cloud-first principle within our digital strategy, to really assess the validity of that and to weigh that up in terms of cost, productivity, effectiveness. There is no doubt that at the moment is consuming heavy processing power and therefore energy for AI. But I also liken that, and I still liken AI to the next industrial revolution. It is a moment in time where every man and his dog is on that bandwagon and everything is using AI. It will probably find its level, and there's no doubt that global resulting will constrain how it's then adopted, and it will find a balance. I think there's something in our Green Plan about how we bring balance to that. we absolutely can't fix what's happening in an Amazon or an AWS type environment, but we can be mindful in our procurement strategies. We can be mindful in terms of the consequence. If you look at the digital sustainability, we've talked very much about what can we do in our gift today. We have a sizable set of data centres that are consuming power on our premises. Much of our AI consumption will be external. But you're right, we need to factor it in. And I've no doubt that as we evolve a green plan and as we make very clear strategic decisions about how we host our digital services, we should then factor that into future green initiatives. And a lot of our supplier management should be about what's their demonstration to satisfying that green plan that helps us make those informed decisions. So there's no easy answer, but we are not alone in facing.
Thanks for that, Lauren. That's helpful. And I think, colleagues, these are our ambitions for the next 3 years, but I think the important thing is that we're engaging our colleagues in those conversations as well to help us deliver this. So no doubt we'll be feeding back in terms of the progress in due course. Are we happy to agree the plan as it's presented to us today? Oh, sorry, Chris.
Quick question, Suzanne. There have been at least quite a number of national funds relating to this sort of thing. Are we optimising our ability to access those national funds? No idea whether they still exist in the changes, but at least there have been opportunities, big opportunities nationally. And are we positioned well for that? Because some of these things will be difficult, I think, to find out of existing allocations.
Probably not as much as we could, is the answer. Nadine nodding there. We're aware of some of the organisations that have perhaps been more successful in that space, and anything that comes up, we will be taking every opportunity. And I think having a plan like this helps with that because it helps focuses.
This is a requirement, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So it's just one of the sort of milestones that we needed to achieve to give us a better shot at accessing what we need to access.
Just to think about.
Great, thanks, Chris. Any other comments? No, have to approve that. Thank you everyone for their contribution to that. Nadine, welcome. Thanks for joining us. So you are here obviously to talk us through the estate strategy. So we've had a chance to read the report, but if there's anything you wanted to highlight, then please do.
Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Nadine Armitage, Director for Capital Estates and Facilities, for those I've not met before. I just thought it might be helpful to provide a little bit of context and draw people's attentions to some key items within the document. So this is our first estate strategy. It's the first one for our Northern Care Alliance. So the intention is to really set a direction for us, a direction of travel. But this builds some of the foundations for us from an estates service perspective. And hopefully this will give us a foundation for how we look at our services across the NCA footprint. And the theme that comes out of the document is we're considering our estates in terms of our acute and community provision, so seeing all of those assets across the NCA footprint. I wanted to draw out that there are some key interdependencies with other strategies that we have as an organisation. So the first of those is the Green Plan, helpfully following on from the Green Plan. So we have an ambition associated with that, which will support and build on things within the Green Plan that we will deliver. There's also the digital strategy, so making reference to that, our preparations in terms of EPR, but also around digital tools that supports our productivity and efficiency within services. And then also the developing clinical strategy. So estates and clinical strategy really strongly need to be aligned and for us to build there in terms of our site configuration, service locations and so on. So trying to keep it tight in terms of 6 ambitions that I think are outlined within the document. The first of those, improving experience and outcomes, heavily aligned with the work around developing the clinical strategy. But the core of this is having safe buildings, so we'll focus on the things that we will need to then support things such as service changes. So we talk about resilience of our critical infrastructure. We have the mandate nationally for REC replacement. We have digital systems that I've referenced, and crucially around utilisation of our buildings. We have a lot of assets across community and acute, and how do we get the best out of those and optimise our assets? And then the last one is around our environmental sustainability. So within the document, reference around those interdependencies, and I think we're recognising some of the challenges that we have within ENF and how we're going to address those. And we've tried to build within the document a clear plan on how we will do that and also how we will measure the progress that we will have. I did want to comment and say this is a document related to the state strategy. And I want to explain we had a rationale around facilities is separate from this. We believe that there's some bespoke strategies that we want to look at for some of our facility services such as laundry, catering and so on. So it might not be included here, but it is something that we're considering as a team.
Okay, thanks Nadine. Any comments or questions? This has also been through Finance Committee as well, hasn't it? Thanks. No? Oh, sorry, oh gosh, get to use this. Right, okay, so Lorna.
Yeah, really, really positive. Nadine's absolutely right, that linkage between digital strategy, where we're trying to go from Vision 10 point of view, where we're going to clinical strategy, this becomes a really key piece of information and it helps us in terms of our investment decisions. So a great example is we've already worked with Nadine's team about upgrading our Wi-Fi. You know, historically, we probably would have put money into upgrading in buildings we have a plan to shut down. No doubt about it. Linking these things together really will help us make really informed choices about where we spend money, and it's back to Dan's point about putting resources where we need to. So really welcome this, and it's a good piece of work, and it's really helpful. We're already working about community, about Wi-Fi, and this strategy helps us make those decisions. So I think it's really well done. Teams have done it.
Thanks, Lorna. Owen?
Yeah, I support the comments that Lorna's made about the quality of the work. It's a good piece of work. I think what I just wanted to refer to is just linking to something that was discussed a little bit earlier around the need for a clinical strategy as well, because there will be a further iteration of this strategy at a point in time, and one of the information points to it will be the clinical strategy. I think one of the things, again, we just need to have regard to as a board is how the clinical strategy actually gets produced and evolved. Because there perhaps can be a tendency to say, let's just get something produced and maybe then lose the opportunity of engagement with clinical colleagues. So I just want to flag that we understand that in the iteration of this estate strategy, it will probably be further informed at a point in time by a clinical strategy. We all agree there is a need for a clinical strategy. But at the same time, how we achieve and produce a clinical strategy will be important. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Owen. It's helpful. Rafiq?
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. So just wanted to say this has been also a document that's been really well consulted on and was discussed extensively at the clinical strategy group as well. There is that link between this work and the clinical strategy moving forward. And just to Owen's point, we are also preparing for some of that in terms of the mature strategy specifically is an organic document that gets the right information.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
So echo the points that's been made about the document. The thing which was in my mind as I read this was that as I go to some of the estates associated with the CA, seems to be a degree of urgency around doing things around some of the areas that are ours. And I just wondered whether, for me, that didn't quite come through in the document in terms of, you know, what's urgent and what's the priority and what needs to be done now, because some of those facilities appear to be deteriorating each time I go to Old, for example. I just wondered if that was picked up somewhere else, strategy, whether it needed to be built up as part of it.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Nadine?
Yes, I'd agree with you in terms of being able to maintain our safe infrastructure. I think in terms of the document, we've highlighted those larger critical items to pay attention to. So we talk about electrical infrastructure and ventilation. And one of the things I wanted to capture is about our level of investment within our backlog and making that commitment, which we reference in terms of how we'll measure success, particularly around addressing those elements of our infrastructure that we categorise as critical or high. So it might not be the level of detail within this particular document, but what sits beneath that would be the work to increase our improve our reduction of critical risk and high risk.
And is that something that's reported through the finance committee, you say?
Yes.
Okay, is that something you're familiar with, Jeff? That it's coming back through finance committee? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Suzanne?
I was just going to make that point. I did make this earlier around capital and you know, we've got a big plan to get through and we need to make sure we're utilising finance committee to get that oversight on this. So not for this one, but the next one, we'll be doing a fuller piece on capital.
Perfect, thank you. Any other comments or questions? No? Nadine, is there anything else you want to add? No? So we're happy to approve the state strategy? Thank you. Thanks for all the work on it. Nadine and team, please pass on our thanks to your colleagues. Free to leave us if you choose. You're welcome to stay also. Okay, let's move on then, colleagues, to quality and performance. So, Chris.
Do I need to press this?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. As with those two reports, which I assume people have had the opportunity to look through, the meetings on 19th of May and the meeting on 16th of June. So take it as people have the opportunity really just to highlight two things. One is this issue of the continued development of the quality governance system. A lot of work has been done by people in the room, Juliet, Tim, Rafiq, others, on the development of the subcommittee structure, which really feeds into quality performance committee, and that I think is becoming a lot sharper and clearer and is beginning to provide the sort of escalation process, which I think is where we need to be. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we've made some strides forward. So just to make that point. Maternity services, as is shown in the IPR, there have been some adverse trends in the numbers of stillbirths after a long period where the numbers of stillbirths has been much lower than expected. There was a number of stillbirths this year. QPC has looked at the details of those actually, and I think for those of us who were there, not an easy experience because these are all difficult, sad situations. We are awaiting, I think, still looking at Rafiq and Juliet, the final report into those events. So it's a series of stillbirths and it's a series of injuries resulting from birth, which have been reviewed, in one case, reviewed externally by the local maternity network and enabled network. So we're getting some external assurance there. But we have, so from the QPC's point of view, that wasn't yet available at the time. So I think we'd want to continue to be very vigilant, but also wait for those reports to come in and report themselves. The information that we have is very reassuring, but I would personally, given the prominence of this issue, the importance of this issue, I would personally want to be very cautious around coming to any conclusions on that. So other than that, just to say thanks to those people who've been helping to improve the work of the committee. We are, of course, down a member at the moment, but I'm sure that's something that is in the mix in terms of thinking about the future of the board.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Juliet?
Thank you. I would agree with Chris in terms of the areas that we put on the alert. We still do have some work to do around improving quality governance infrastructure. I think and I are working really closely on that. So I still think it's going to take a little bit of time. I think you are aware that we are in the process of commissioning a quality governance review, which was a recommendation to us from the region. So we'll Tim is pulling that together. I think that hopefully we'll recognise improvements that are made, but it is likely to show that there's still some areas that we need to improve. Then just on the maternity, the report that we get to QPC on maternity services, which has been coming with regularity, and we have been, and we're just in the process, just about to get the final report on the niche, the review from niche, which will obviously go to QPC. We're expecting that in August. It's probably worth noting, isn't it, here, we're discussing in part 2 around the review that's been commissioned by Secretary of State into maternity services. And I know, Jay, you were on the same webinar that I was on, and did obviously talk about things that we have got quite a degree of assurance on, particularly around safety issues in maternity. I think did point to some other issues which we might need to pay attention to, which is our culture and the woman's voice. I think it is important that we have been focusing on safety features. But I think we will need to add in additional assurance data around culture and around the voice of the woman at QPC. So we'll focus on that, what that needs to look like. And at the moment, we're not sure whether, we don't know which organisations will be selected for review. So we'll wait. The person will be put in the chair will choose those. It's just kind of to know.
Okay, thanks, Julia. Owen?
Yes, so one of the questions I was going to ask about where we're up to with the follow-up. So that's in August, is it? And so which QPC will that be going to then? So it'll be going to sit thereafter. I think just on the patient woman voice in this, I think again it'd be just useful to understand where the work from the race observatory has got to, because our demographic mix of our women receiving care is not your atypical mix, has a much more ethnic dimension to it, and certainly some of the feedback we've got wasn't where we would want it to be. So I think I'd be really keen to see whether the race observatory work has helped on that, and outside of that, where are we on that? I think it's also just worth reflecting that as a trust, in terms of the change portfolio, this maternity still remains as one of our 4 key boulders, as we've described it. I think that is important, that we don't lose sight of it. And I was just thinking, Joe, maybe just a conversation offline, because I can't quite recall the gateway status. And I'd just say that, you know, I've always had a twitchiness about maternity moving from the kind of improvement board status that we had to those dreaded words as business as usual. And I just feel that it's just something that we just need to keep reminding ourselves of, Chair, about the importance of this, because as a minimum, this is the one unique service that is always dealing with a minimum of 2 lives, if not more, with every interaction. I just think it's really important that we don't lose sight of this ever. So thank you, Chair.
No, absolutely, really important point. So thank you for raising that. I think there are a couple of things that we've talked about, and we'll pick this up in part 2 as well. But I think, as well as hearing from women who use our services and their families, we also need to make sure that we're hearing from, we are understanding who we're hearing from and who we're not. So if we're missing sections of our community because we're not getting feedback from them, then we need to understand that as much as possible as well. So thank you. Rafiq.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of add to what Chris shared in terms of the perinatal injuries, investigations, etc. We had a reasonably in-depth investigation of the research with QPC around those injuries with external input, etc. I think as a committee, what we wanted was just to add in another layer of looking through themes that have fallen out of the investigation that weren't directly related to the particular injury, because we didn't have assurance that that was properly captured as learned. So we'll take that away, and I'm working with the team just to address that. And two other quick points I wanted to highlight. Just wanted to draw colleagues' attention to the comments about children's services. So that's another area that Juliette, myself, and Jude are working with colleagues just to make the oversight of the consolidated children's services that we provide in the trust a little bit more visible, so that we can bring assurance to the wider board. And the same with the clinical audit. We're expecting a report to come to the next QPC to highlight a way forward in terms of some improvements there as well.
Thank you, Fake. Tim, and then Aziz.
Yeah, it's just picking up Juliette's point about somebody talked a little wider on how we could better hear the voices of women and families at the board at QPC. So just I mentioned it to yourself yesterday at meeting. I met with our lead for MNVP, so the Maternity Neonatal Voices Partnership, to kind of not interfere with any of that work, but it's an important source of assurance that probably we're not getting the full value from. So understanding a little more the barriers to her work and her engagement officers, the communities we are getting to, which we are doing some great work. You know, in Alderburgh, a good example with Rochdale is where we're struggling more to get access to family hubs. So kind of looking to strengthen that conduit to into our governance structure. So probably talking separately to Julia about kind of how the MNVP and the safety champions are more formally meet. But it was a good meeting. Kind of gave me a lot of confidence, as well as where we've got some gaps around hearing those voices. But it's probably, we get a lot of data on maternity, but having a bigger section on experience, I think, is kind of our next step.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Aziz?
We did have two community midwives, and when they started a couple of years ago, I didn't meet both of them actually, and I don't know if, I think it was about one whole-time equivalent, and I know that resource is reduced, but I think there is still some resource in terms of community midwife. So, I wonder if we could hear from them sometime. I think it's worth bearing in mind that this was 1 month, and it obviously they're being properly investigated, and we await the full report. But it is possible. It's not statistically significant. These things can happen in spikes in any type of situation, not just maternity. So I think we should wait and find out what the report is. However, given that had happened, I thought that the maternity report would come to board, and I just wondered in terms of, because no reports from QPC have come to board this month, which must be a first. I wondered how that decision is made, because I thought actually the board might want to read the paper we read, which told us about those situations and about the injury, actually the birth injuries, and that was, it was a very, I thought it was quite a thorough report, even though we haven't had the full independent sort of investigation of it. With the board hearing, I just don't know who makes that decision as to whether a paper should follow on into board.
Thanks. Chris, did you want to respond to that? I mean, it is included in the IPR, the data, of course, isn't it? So
the requirement. So the requirement now is for maternity, the perinatal mortality surveillance report, which is what we look at, to come to board on a quarterly basis. That's the current requirement in year, whatever it is, I forget, on the MIS. So that's what we're complying with. Make sure that we comply with that. As Tim has pointed out, there's also the issues in there relating to the maternity champion role. Just to be as straight as I can, picking up on the fees point, I think the question that the committee put back to the people who produced the reports for us on this series of events is what we had was a very good analysis of a series of individual cases. What we didn't have was any detailed analysis of looking for commonalities between them. That's the point that we've been asked. So was it the same person, or were there any particular times of day? All those sorts of things, which clearly are the sorts of things which we would have to assure ourselves about. But that's what we haven't yet got.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point that you're making, Aziz, is that this is really still important to the board, and we will pay attention to it. I think what we're talking here is about strengthening some of that information as well that comes to the board, so that we understand it better in the rounded sense, so that we're not just looking at just an element of the service that we provide. So, Joe.
First, Jim.
Oh right, sorry. Rafiq, did you want to respond to some of that?
No, I'm sorry, I haven't put it down. I'm happy if you'd like to respond to that.
Thanks, Chair. So it's just to respond to Owen's specific point, that phase 3 of the maternity programme was signed off by the Change Portfolio Board and closed for that forum in April. So it now sits outside that assurance framework. But the assurance framework is and needs to be agile. So if there are reasons to re-invoke that level of assurance, I think the board should consider doing so. And that could either come back through the Change Portfolio Board, or it could go by another route. I do recall that Owen commissioned me not long after my arrival to do a separate ad hoc piece of assurance on the maternity programme that proved quite useful. So I think we should keep that option open.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Juliet?
Yeah, just going back to the perinatal mortality report, and I think Chris' point about needing to, we are required to receive it here quarterly. The thing that's important is perinatal mortality is a really important thing to pay attention to. It's a rare event, which we need to be aware of. There's an awful lot more about maternity services, which we need to pay attention to. And I think that's the point, is that there could be some very poor experiences that people are having, which we're never going to see through a mortality report because it's not associated with that. So I think, when we're having the conversation about what we want to see, I think it's important to see that whole rounded picture of maternity services. It's right that we focused on safety, it really is, but it's not the only feature of maternity services. So I think that there are sorts of conversations that Chris, as chair of QPC, and I've been having about where does that attention need to be for maternity services, and the big point about looking at kind of the wider neonatal and children's services, to try and pull all those kind of things together to ensure that we are looking at the right things. And there is a lot of detail in the paradigm. We do see a lot of detail.
We see a lot of detail, but we're required to see a lot of detail, and I think there's a good argument that it's quite difficult to see through that detail the message. I think that's what we're doing.
Absolutely, and I think one of the, although we don't know quite what the scope of the national review is going to look like just yet, but one of the hopes is that will lead to some clarity on what boards see and actually what might be helpful in some consistency across organisations as well. So, okay, thank you, colleagues. Any other questions or comments on the quality reports? May, June? No, that's good to note. Thank you. Okay, going to move us then back to into people and education. Please.
Thank you, Chair. So we met on the 18th of June. The figures you got earlier in the IPR are kind of more recent figures. So this alert about appraisals, I'm delighted to say they're now 89%, but they're still not the 90% rate. And at the time of this meeting, only Rochdale and the States had achieved over 90%. Congratulate them. in November, the committee received the results of the GMC National Training Survey. That normally reports every year, but there were some concerns about it, so we asked them to report in 6 months, and they did come back to us this month. There's still some concerns identified, but although NCA PGME has robust quality management and intervention process, there are still challenges whenever specialities don't fully engage, and the Chief Medical Officer confirmed that the medical leadership team will review the governance reporting structures there. I also wanted to just advise that the Food Speak Up exec role now lies with the Chief People Officer, Gertie, we also, every month we hear from a different care organisation. This month it was the Diagnostics and Pharmacy, and they had some good news to report actually, especially on their job planning compliance, which was 98%, which is compared to an NCA compliance rate of 68%. So we were, you know, we all can learn from that. Although the NCA compliance has improved from 48%, actually, so as an organisation we are improving, but need to improve further. The other thing was that DMP has done a really good job in reducing their sickness rates, and the Director of Attraction and Retention is going to link into their HR team, see if there's any learning from DMP that can be spread across the organisation as a whole, because obviously sickness still, even though it's reducing, that's great, it needs to reduce for our target, to get to our target.
Okay, thank you. Zays, any questions or comments on people and education? Wait.
It's so strange, isn't it? Actually, Ruthie, I was just wondering if you could just give us a bit more clarity on the response. So I kind of, as easy as point out that there was some points about governance and whatever else. Can you just provide us a bit more clarity about what are we going to do about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what is described is related to some of the results of training surveys, and we're a big organisation with lots of learners, and generally we would have a spectrum of sort of reports in individual specialties, depending on the level of concern we may have when something is raised. There is a formal framework that we sort of implement and sort of supporting with action plans, etc. And our education team are excellent at doing this. What we have identified over the past few months is sometimes, even though that support comes from the education team, or we have seen on a couple of occasions less than ideal engagement from those individual specialties where the problems are. And so there's a bit of a culture thing about the education team feeling like they can't sort of take an enforcement role, where really our medical directors and myself need to be supporting them to ensure that we are clear on the need for engagement and when it isn't forthcoming for us to address.
We would probably take it offline. I think what I'm after is so when is whatever change or intervention we're going to make in that space, when do we envisage that going, so we can then take that offline?
If I may briefly come back on that, so already trained the change itself, but there are some additional sort of measures in terms of where the visibility of those reports and the governance are in the organisation, because we don't have consistency in terms of visibility. For example, at division level, payroll level, the reporting is patchy. So the medical directors are already clear that they will be supporting and things will be escalated to them. But also there's an additional piece of work that needs to happen just to make sure that we're on what is reported where.
Okay, thank you. Anything you wanted to add there, Gertie? Anything from your perspective?
No, I think if I could just put one thing that we did receive an update on the. I'm supposed to help me with that. It was just to briefly pull out, we received the update on the Q1 pulse survey, and whilst the take-up wasn't significant in the same way the National Staff Survey is. Some really helpful insights. And I think the one that I would pick out is that we actually had we have 3 questions at the end that we can tailor locally. And Julie and I will both reflect on actually the amount of colleagues that now readily recognise, care, appreciate and inspire as our values, which I think is a really positive feedback and recognition of the work that has been done in the last 2 years to really reset the values of the organisation, and gives us a really strong springboard for the work that Julie's talking about in terms of the communication strategy, where we really set out very clearly those behaviours that do live our values, and really importantly, the behaviours that do not live our values. And I think that's the next evolution for us and how we set the culture in the organisation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Gertie. Any other comments or questions on people and education? No, that's for us to know. Colleagues, okay, we are ahead of time on the agenda, so I am going to propose that we take a break, go in line with the agenda. So we're at 10 past just now. So we've got 10 minutes to grab a drink and stretch your legs, and we'll come back shortly.
Can I say that?
Onto the agenda, so we're back at audit and risk. So Tim.
All right, sorry, I wasn't. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, an important meeting we had, given all the year-end matters that we work through. So you can see, if I turn to it first, one of the things that the board of directors is asked to receive and acknowledge is certainly to note the approval in principle of the 2024-25 annual report and accounts. And now it is that point that we see every year, subject to there being no material changes required, following conclusion of the Greater Manchester Pension Fund audit. So you know, we have that delay in the year till that is finally closed, but for all intents and purposes, this audit committee received all the sort of end of year representations, the completion report from external audit, and the compliance with the code of governance, so all those year-end issues. So the audit has gone very well, and probably I would flag the importance of kind of conveying that to the board in terms of the work of the finance team and the relationship with external audit. That not in every organisation every year that is the case, but it was so this year. So certainly commend finance and our corporate governance team and all that support the annual preparation of the annual report. So those processes have gone well. We also received the internal audit head of audit opinion. That was a moderate assurance. That was the same as last year. So that does reflect kind of what the board has seen in terms of internal audit opinions across the year. And something we're coming through and improving a lot on has been the backlog of internal audit recommendations in some pretty tricky areas, and that has improved substantially, but it is part of why we're still at that moderate assurance. Now, the ambition of the Audit Risk Committee is that we move to a more substantial assurance in this year, but in no way do we want to constrain directing our internal auditors to areas where we have known risks and want them to review that. Other areas that I'd kind of just point to in regard to the limited assurances reports we received and the responses we received to those, and the meeting was with regard to clinical audit and to IT services continuity, disaster recovery. So we had assurance from executives who attended with regard to the action plans and the progress in respect of those. And the other areas are kind of our standard fare, but you can kind of see we've already received with regard to risk appetite, the board assurance framework at proper scrutiny at audit and risk committee. So certainly take any questions on audit and risk committee's meeting.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Any questions, comments? No? Okay, so are we happy to agree those two recommendations as well as noting what was discussed at audit and risk? We are happy to approve in principle the annual report and accounts. Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on then, thanks Tim, to charitable funds and Jeff.
Thanks, Chair. What will our meeting on the 14th of May? The main issue to report back on is the approval by the committee of our new 5-year strategy for Northcare. The committee approved the strategy in its draft form, in particular the 5 new priorities for the charity. So maternity, dementia and frail elderly, caring for our colleagues, innovation and health inequalities in the population. The strategy is attempting to focus as far as possible this strategy on those priorities. We received the outcome of consultation on the draft strategy, along with projections of income and expenditure over the 5-year period, and we also approved the update of the policies underpinning the operation of Northcare. The new strategy in draft form still needs to go through the strategic management team for consideration. And once that's happened, it'll come back here to the board for final approval at our next meeting. Other matters discussed by committee are as set out in the report. Very happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Jeff. And we should probably note Lorna and Harriet's contribution to our charity in their 3 Peaks challenge. Well done. Anybody got any comments or questions? Just to note. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Thanks, Jeff. Let's move on then to the change portfolio report. And Owen.
Thank you, Chair. Sort of what is the usual double act between myself and Louise, so I will cover off 16 Monday, 16 May, and then Louise will come in. And really just to track taking both of those reports as read, just to track where we've seen some positive movement. So in the political leadership model, which has been a constant theme when we've talked about it from a change portfolio point of view. In May, we were reg-rated for governance and delivery due to capacity issues and off track on milestones. But in June, we improved to amber governance and green delivery. This really did reflect sort of realignment of the critical path for development of detailed mobilisation and transition planning, and no milestones now off track. Which again, you just think about the conversation we've been having about the clinical model does represent some progress that should be noted. Similarly with the medical workforce, although still reg rated, I think it's just worth again noting that there's been notable improvement, particularly in care engagement and financial benefit identification. So still work to do there, but again, a sense of progress. Probably sort of new to that in terms of an area just to have a focus on. It is estates and facilities in terms of June, but that's largely due to at that point in time the financial, 59% financial measures identified against CIP. We've already seen movement around some of that, so I'm flagging it because it's in the report. But already, in terms of the days that we've seen, there's been really good progress around that, and that was noted in the last CIP meeting that we had on Monday. So just wanted to flag that. Kind of ongoing across May and June in terms of ongoing concerns. The nursing and midwifery and AHPs is still a challenge. RAG rated for both governance and delivery. And there's work to do around updating of programme plans and impact assessments. So obviously there's delivery risks, but I know that certainly Juliet and colleagues are working on driving some of that through. So I'm very positive that over the coming months we'll start to see progress in that area. And then just in terms of new sort of programme updates in June, we talked about the roadmap introduction from March 2026 in respect of digital infrastructure remediation. Again, progress towards the £10.9 million savings target in terms of corporate FSP, including vacancy holder bars, and the major trauma hospital. The post implementation review is underway. And then I won't repeat the financial sustainability plan progress because some of that's already covered off. But again, just to get a sense of movement, and it's more reassurance than assurance because we've still got work to go. But in May, we had £49.6 million identified in ENUB. By June, that moved to 62.8. So there's movement around some of that. I think it's important to acknowledge at that point, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions on 1A and B before Mullins comes in.
Okay, thank you. Aziz.
I've kind of repeatedly worried about the medical workforce not budging, and it's really welcome to see a change there. It was that engagement piece, but there's still sort of work to do. I just wondered how it may be more of a question for Rafiq really, but it's kind of still behind target in terms of cost improvement programme savings, and I just wondered how we maintain this welcome improvement and momentum and how we progress on that CIP gap.
Thanks, Aziz. So when we last discussed this at board, if you recall, I said that there were changes in train that I was confident would bring us in line with the targets, and that I was confident that we didn't need to revise any of our sort of delivery targets. I remain in that place. There are some quite big, chunky projects that are just a little bit complicated and take us a few weeks to work through in terms of just clarity of how they will be addressed and what they will yield in terms of financial benefit. And as soon as those come online, I'm confident that we will have significant jumps in those figures. So very assured from that perspective, and assured with the engagement and application of sort of resources across all care organisations to achieve that. And it's been achieved mainly through a more functional sort of programme board approach that is holding us collectively to account in
Thank you for that. Jeff.
Thanks, Joe. Just noting to the first one, sustainability plan, 3-year plan, which is referenced in the reports here on the 2 meetings. I've asked that the financial stability plan also come to the finance committee. I stand by that, but one of the key challenges this year will be for us to refresh that 3-year plan. Because ask that we do work in between meetings to ensure that the change portfolio board, the finance is not just duplicating each other, and there's clarity of what the 2 roles are.
And I'm going to ask Suzanne to do that piece of work. Make sure we've got clarity. Don't need to respond, just ask.
Okay, thank you. Rachel?
Thank you. Looking at clinical leadership model and medical workforce, first of all, I'm assuming that lots of the same people are involved in those from a clinical leadership and also care org leadership perspective. There's reference in the report to some challenges around attendance and connection. Are we seeing that same challenge in the CLM programme or in other areas? And is this something that perhaps needs to be addressed more broadly to encourage that involvement, given the critical leadership that we have there? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So the groups from a programme board perspective are slightly different. So the composition is different. We don't have any of those issues with leadership model programme board and engagement generally with the work being done. There is a facet that we have been sort of working through together over the past few weeks with CLM specifically in terms of ensuring that our current care organisation leadership are aligned with the programme team in terms of ensuring that mobilisation transition to the new model it has the right connectivity and expertise input into it. And I think some of our S&T teams had a little bit of ambiguity as to where, for example, some of our transitional arrangements sit. And so we're bringing clarity to that. With the medical workforce, we have had a definite sort of engagement issue related to possibly not recognising medical workforce programme captures, if you like, all the different aspects of medical workforce challenge across the organisation. And so some colleagues were very care organisation focused, but I think we have addressed that and will continue to.
Thank you. I think that was my concern, Chair, around the very visible and strong influence and role model that we have with those care org leaders. If they are not considering themselves as a core part of medical workforce and clinical leadership, what impact that then has on the adoption of the change as we move forward.
Any other comments, Owen?
No, I'm still on, just in case anybody's got any questions.
Fantastic. Okay, Joe?
Shirley, I just want to make one comment. I guess this is personally invoking the high risk appetite. But I just want to point out, because it's been a while since we talked about how this framework is working for us. Yeah. But I would say that at NCA, the way we're using the framework and the Louise's leadership is holding the programmes to the highest of standards. What you would tend to find in using these frameworks elsewhere is that your overall rating would tend to be some sort of aggregate of the sub-ratings. But what you'll see on the dashboard here is that to earn a green rating, every one of those sub-ratings has to be in the right place. So what that means is that comparatively, if you were to pick up a dashboard from somewhere else, you might think that this looks overly colourful, if I can put it that way. But actually, what you're seeing is absolute rigour in terms of every programme having to bring every aspect of its work up to the correct standard. So I think it's exactly the right picture, it's exactly the right methodology. So I just wanted to add that. I think it's, and actually as a tangential but related issue, I think the same is true of the way that NTA is managing through the CIP PMO. But we know that at the moment we're having some issues about the way overall reporting is done in that domain across the NHS. But I think that the NCA picture is a very, very rigorous and robust one that probably, if anything, understates the progress that's being made because everything is being held to such a high standard. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you for that, Joe.
Yeah, we'll touch on the broader performance issues, I'm sure, later on in the day. But I think the real point that Joe is making is at the heart of our broader ability to improve. And I think certainly my job to really focus on all aspects of where we claim to have governance and ask the straightforward question, what's the degree of rigour that we've got? Because we know that the standard that we can work, that can progress things. And certainly I want to move to a place where if I was asking myself that same question in 12 months, that there wouldn't be any aspect of what we talk about where you couldn't expect that same level of rigour, because we know it works. And I think it's just a question for all of us in the forums that we're involved in. To what degree are we confident that there is a level of rigour being applied to what we're trying to achieve?
Okay, thank you. Lorna?
Yeah, I was just reflecting in terms of the context and the conversations we've had so far on board today. You know, we're very focused on financial challenge, the cash flow issues, the risks, all rightly. There's equally something to remind ourselves, isn't there? And I often forget myself that actually, when you then look at the AAA report about change portfolio, we are doing some big change at a time when we are also wrestling with some real big shoulder issues in terms of breadth or demand or difficult decisions to make every single day. And there's something about how we just remind ourselves to celebrate some of these things, because actually when you go to the change portfolio board and you hear the update and we do the deep dive, there's some tangible deliverables happening that will ultimately transform what we do. Now, we might still have huge risk and we might have all sorts of things to worry about and, you know, sleepless nights every so often. But there is something about how we make sure we communicate that back out to 18,000 colleagues who might equally only hear the money's a problem, there's no people to do it, and we're in a changing climate outside. So it's just a reflection of myself that there's something about how we keep talking about it and remind ourselves.
Yeah, okay, no, good point. And I'm sure Julie take note of that as well in terms of our messaging that we are getting out to the organisation. Okay, thank you, colleagues. No other questions on that. That's for us to know. I'm going to invite Louise to say anything she wants to do in terms of highlighting the assurance report.
So I'll introduce the portfolio assurance report under item 16.2. So in terms of the format of the report, that remains the same as we've previously seen. In terms of the scope of change portfolio board and therefore the portfolio assurance report itself, there are two changes to note on slide 6 of 36 compared to the previous report that was presented to May's Board of Directors. So the maternity improvement programme has been removed from the live programme scope slide, so that's slide 6,
and transferred to the closed programme scope slide 7. And that was following approval of the programme closure at April's Change Portfolio Board. That will be subsequently followed by a post-implementation review carried out by the Portfolio Assurance Office, so Gateway 4 in assurance speak, around October, November. So that tends to be 6 months following programme closure. And secondly, the 3 clinical service excellence programmes have also been removed from that live programme scope slide and shown as transferred to the Planning and Performance Group on slide 7. And that, again, that was following approval at April's Change Portfolio Board, accompanied by an ongoing assurance review around the effectiveness of those transition arrangements, which we'll report back to Change Portfolio Board in the next couple of months. So I'll describe the assurance position at a portfolio level, and then I'll pause to allow discussion or questions of individual senior responsible owners around specific programmes. So as usual, slide 12 includes the graphs showing the trend of the overall governance and delivery assurance ratings. Slide 13 includes the summary dashboard. The total number of programmes in the portfolio in June was 11, and 9 of those 11 are currently being assured. From a governance perspective, we saw an increase in the number of green RAG ratings in June from 1 to 2, those programmes being digital infrastructure remediation and medicines management, and that was due to medicines management achieving 100% compliance with its impact assessments. We also saw the same number of red RAG ratings with regards to governance as the prior month, and so that's 3 in total, but that was actually pertaining to different programmes. So in June, that related to medical workforce, nursing and midwifery, and estates and facilities, based clinical leadership model. And that movement has kind of been referenced a little earlier. Estates and facilities moved from amber to red due to the proportion of financial benefits identified remaining at about 59% at that point in time against an increased CIP target in June. The CLM clinical leadership model moved from red to amber due to the work taking place in June, particularly around aligning the critical path and the milestone tracking, and work ongoing to develop a more detailed mobilisation and transition plan. From a delivery perspective, we saw an increase in the number of green RAG ratings in June from 1 to 3, those programmes being medicines management, procurement and the clinical leadership model. And that was due to procurement moving from red to green due to the financial benefits having been transacted, which were previously reported as off track, and the clinical leadership model moving from red to green due to the programme plan having been reprofiled and all milestones shown as being on track. There was a corresponding decrease in the number of red RAG ratings from 4 to 2, so that left nursing and medical workforce shown as red. Programmes with any red RAG ratings are highlighted in the matter to alert section of the AAA report, just direct attention to any areas that might require a little bit of extra scrutiny. I'll pause there to allow some discussion. Okay, thanks, Louise. Any comments or questions, Rachel?
Just thank you for adding the trend arrow, because actually that was an ask from me, and what that's done for me, I think, is looking at the report from Owen, looking at the content of the report, but actually just gives a really quick snapshot. What's moved? Where do we need to be focusing? And it's just such a simple addition, but it's really effective. Though I don't doubt how much effort goes into deciding what arrow goes in there. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other comments or questions? It's very comprehensive, thanks, Louise. So there's a number of things we've been asked is obviously to accept the assurance report, support the programme assurance in the framework, and then also to request action from the senior responsible owner. I think is there anything specific around that, Louise? It's picked up through programme boards, to be honest, in terms of areas to focus, but particularly where there's a red or amber RAG rating. Thanks, colleagues. Okay, let's move on then to the spinal safety, patient safety report. Rafiq.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues. So 2 documents in this section. One of them is the AAA report from the latest Green Recommendations Oversight Group, and the second is an update report on where we are with the Green Action Plan. So what I'd like to just pull out are, we had some in-depth discussions at board and other fora specifically on this issue appropriately. I just want to remind colleagues of how we reframe the governance. So everything that sits under the Green Action Plan is overseen from the Green Recommendations Oversight Group, and everything else, which are essentially things that come from the Spinal Patient Safety Look-Back Review and the review of our 39 patients who have come forward since the publication of reviews, are classed as patient safety issues that are overseen from QPC. The action plan is described with what I hope is much clearer reporting, because we have seen versions of this in the past. I think colleagues had wanted further clarity in this update, and hope that this provides that. I think the things to note are clearly we've had a transition in leadership and trust, so Juliette and her team will be essentially focusing on the governance section, and to recognise that we've sort of adjusted some of the delivery timelines to ensure that there's appropriate time for Juliette to be fully briefed and to take this forward. So that impacts a couple of the governance actions that you see. One of the things that is a topic of ongoing discussion is just an assessment of where we go from here in terms of ensuring that all the actions are actually embedded and result in change. So that's a topic of constant discussion, and I think will help inform how long we need Green Recommendation Oversight Group to continue, how we oversee other bits and outcomes, and we're having a discussion about using a gateway approach in terms of a gateway for this to oversee, to essentially assess the implementation and embedding. There has been a question raised a couple of times about our assurance in terms of the quality of the spinal service. We continue to wrap around the standard trust governance around that service. But in addition to that, there's a couple of things just worth being aware of that are mentioned. One of them is a GERT invited review, which we have organized for the beginning of August, which will allow the national GERT team to come in and do a thorough review and give us some feedback the team is engaged in. And the second thing is the spinal network is setting up a peer review process that our teams are fully engaged in. And so there will be a peer review of the service that will be scheduled in due course, which will add in that external assurance from peers as well. Final point I want to just touch on is just a reminder, there's a national inquiry which is kicked off into this. There's a series of interviews that have kicked off, informal interviews to start with. So I've met with the inquiry chair and discussed the history and some of the detail of what we have been doing, and they will be collecting this information. They will ask us for additional information, which we will provide, and we expect that there will be follow-up meetings as well. So just to be aware that that's happening in the background with the target date for delivery of October. So I think it's worth just monitoring whether that will be a realistic timeline for this. At the heart of all of this, we need to remember that there are the patients and the families who are impacted. And I think the Green Recommendations Oversight Group allows us to have that additional connectivity with them as a group, because representatives sit as full members there, and Jeff is a member and very effectively constantly reminds us to keep the focus around that. So I think that's a really important thing. You'll see in the documents, had scheduled a meeting with them in May for us to go and visit the patient group. So rather than speaking just to the representatives, meeting with the wider group, but that was cancelled for various reasons from their side, and we're in discussions with them about rescheduling it. I think the key thing here is we want to emphasize that we will continue to make ourselves available to have what may sometimes be difficult conversations with colleagues because of the history. I also think we just need to recognize that all the action that we will take, I think, will help improve trust, and will ensure that we get to a position as an organisation where nothing like this happens again. But because of the harm that has been caused, we've identified through all of our processes, I think there's a baseline level of trust that we will never be able to fully achieve with the group. And I think the external inquiry and involvement of other parties will help with that. So I'll pause there. So I talked a little longer than I had planned, but very happy.
Okay, thanks, Rafiq. Any questions or comments? So Rachel.
On the second paper here, the senior leadership appointments, have any really quite significant breaches been identified around that medical leadership appointment? Anything that would need to be declared, for example, lapsed certifications, etc. Is there anything that you feel needs to be flagged to us at this point of that work?
No, so nothing of that nature that I would feel would need to require follow-on action, but it is important to note that when we audited this last year, our compliance with the process was not adequate. And so we've taken some additional steps to ensure that there is the awareness and hopefully the rigidity around implementation, application of our processes, and we will be re-auditing this. And some of this also filters into that next phase of our clinical leadership model and recruitment to future leadership posts in the new operating model as well.
In some context, Chair, in discussions in board development sessions, etc., we identified that internal governance, we were only monitoring certain aspects of those qualifications and certifications. And for others, we were dependent on an external body verifying it for us, and whether or not that was rigorous enough from our perspective. I apologise, I don't have any more of the detail on both of those. I just remember the broader concept.
May I say a quick comment on that? So that relates to some of the things that we've discussed in terms of gynecology issues, and it's essentially accreditation for some of our cancer screening, which is dependent, as you say, on a combined external sort of assurance, which we have learned is not as robust as maybe we would have expected it to be, but also self-reporting, where our processes weren't as robust in saying, well, have they or haven't they reported? And so we have changed the process around that, specifically for the screening issues, because they aren't as visible as, for example, my GMC registration, which as a trust we can sort of seek.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rafiq. Jeff?
That's Chair. First of all, I think the overall quality and comprehensiveness of the report is now much better than it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. So thank you for that. To make an obvious point, the discussions that are underway now on how this goes forward really do need to involve the patient group representatives and the group itself. I think they should be advising us whether they think the next iteration of this is the right one or not. And that connection, and though there's still work to be done to put in place a proper single point of contact for individual patients and their families, I think that's really urgent now, because without that, the trust really can't be built. And I think we need to do all we can to have more frequent meetings with the patient group itself, not just with the representatives through the Green Recommendations Group. Thank you, Chair.
You want to respond to that?
No, I'm happy about note the comments in the
Thanks, Chris?
I was just going to say that I thought the report was very helpful in setting it out. First time I've seen it anyway, might have been before my time, but first time I've seen it set out in quite this way. I guess I think there might be reflections, might there, about how actions are formulated in a smart way for the future. Because I guess it's looking at some of these things here, it's actually quite difficult for you to measure whether they've been done or not. but it's just very helpful to see it in this way, so thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. I think that's completely approved as well. I want to just say two things. First, we will continue to iterate this to ensure we improve the clarity. And also within that is a constant just review and reflection as to whether the actions are landing us in a place where we are assured that the recommendations, the specific recommendations, are addressed. So the actions may evolve as well. And the other thing I just want to say is a massive thank you to the people who've contributed to getting this to where we are, Julie, and Jess Roberts, done a massive amount of work to get here.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? So we're happy to know the update report and the update on the recommendations as well. Okay, colleagues. Let's move on then to the communication strategy, Julie.
Thank you, Chair. So I did bring a draft of the communication strategy to the June meeting. So really this is just to bring it back, I guess, with the amends that you asked me to make. And thank you for that. Just a couple of things, I guess we have it sort of designed up a little bit. My intention is probably to go with something similar to this. Thank you to Claire, who joins us today, Head of Communications, for her input. She's helped massively to get this into a good spot with the language and my team as well. So I guess it's just the final stamp to say that obviously it'll have its own communications plan, communications and engagement plan. And it's actually quite nice because people who've seen this are starting to play back the principles in it to me, and that's perfect. It's just a document at the end of the day. It's how we use it and what we do with it. So that was it, really. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Any comments or questions on the communication strategy, please?
It feels very different from the last one we brought, and you've taken on board everything that was said at the board, and I think it's really clear what the asks are from you and what we're trying to do. And I just thought it was really clearly set out, and I liked it very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aziz. Any other comments or questions? Chris?
Well, just to say, I thought it was great. I absolutely love the 8 topics that we're going to communicate about proactively. So I think that really helps to, as well as have in our minds and try and support.
Okay, any other thought? No? Okay, so that's for us to accept the final version ahead of publication. We're happy to do that. Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks, Julie and Claire, for your input to that. So I'm going to move on to the next couple of items. So we've got the Chair's report from the Council of Governors. That's just really for information. There's 2 reports there from the 9th of May and the 23rd of June. I wasn't planning on going through those unless colleagues want to raise any questions. Just really for information. Okay, and then the next item is again an information item, which is details of the closed session held on the 7th of May. Anybody got any comments on that? Supposed to note. I haven't been notified of any other business unless anybody wants to tell me of any. No? Okay, thank you. So we're on to board performance and reflections. So any comments or reflections on our board session today? Rachel.
I'm really enjoying seeing continuous improvement around what each paper's for, what the ask of us is at board. I think the clarity in the year and a half, it just keeps getting better. And I think we're being much more succinct about targeting our comments in relation to that as well. So it's felt like really good flow today. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Rachel. Aziz?
Yeah, I agree. I think the meeting was very well chaired. Your first meeting, thank you very much. And I think actually we all played our part properly too, actually, which is, you know, to help you, which is really important that everyone contributes in a concise and measured way and doesn't go on for too long. I don't think everyone did today, so thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Aziz. Chris?
It was just a real pity it wasn't saying that the patient story didn't
Yes.
take place, and I know that's unavoidable. So, it just, as you said, it'll be a good set the tone for the meeting.
Yeah, it's definitely, and it's part of the agenda, isn't it? Thanks, Chris. Any other reflections on whether we really adequately thought about our objectives in relation to our population, our colleagues, stakeholders? No. I don't know where we're up to. Okay, thank you, colleagues. So I'm going to bring the meeting to a close. Date of the next meeting to be decided is 6th of August, but whether or not we're going to hold a public meeting is a question we'll consider outside of the meeting. But I will resolve now to exclude the press and public from the meeting at this point on the grounds that the publicity of the matters may be reviewed might be prejudicial to public interest by reason of the confidential nature of business, which basically means the press and public for us to leave it. Okay, thanks, colleagues. So we are now at 12:01.